First set of questions, just to jog your memory, get a little background information on you. When you were born, and kind of the upbringing that you had and schools you went to and that kind of thing.
Well, born in Detroit, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and well, I went through high school, of course. There, I went through first grade school, intermediate, and then high school.
Mm-hmm.
And got out of high school and went to work, well, for Hudson Department Store in the warehouse for a while. But then I got into Plymouth, Chrysler Plymouth,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working on the line there. That's where I was. Well, that wasn't where I was when I went into service, but that's where I was when the war
Broke out.
broke out. And from there I went to, I think, Cadillac for a very short time while Plymouth changed over to war work.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cadillac changed over to war work. So I ended up as a thread grinder, grinding thread gauges.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1921.
1921.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Depression affect your family a bit?
Yes, it did. Yes, we had a pretty rough time. But my father, he couldn't afford to make payments on the house. But he decided he'd stay there until they threw us out. Well, the house belonged to the bank. The bank had so many houses that they just let us stay there and pick up where we left off when we were able to after the Depression. So that worked out okay.
Don't find that anymore, do you?
No,
Yeah.
no, you won't find anything like that.
Do you recall where you were or what you were doing when you got the word or you finally heard that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor?
No, just must have been just normal everyday
Mm-hmm.
life. I can't remember exactly where.
Right. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted,
Yeah. When was that?
and that was in February of 1943. Yeah, 43. February 43, it had to be, right.
And from there, did you go? Where did you go to do your basic training?
Up Fort Lewis, Washington, 44th Infantry Division.
And so you were with them for a while prior to the 70th.
Right, and then from there I came home and got married.
Okay.
And on the way home to get married, we had a train accident in Miles City, Montana, which delayed me for a day, but I was able to get an extension on my furlough, and we did get married.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife then followed me all over the States while I was still here.
Oh, okay. Can you describe the training you received? What kind of, and you trained as an infantryman, is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. Can you kind of briefly describe some of the things that you had to go through training?
I remember a lot of the
A lot of
field
marching?
trips that we made, but one thing that sticks in my mind, about the only thing, is going on your belly under the machine gun fire that they were firing over your head. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I don't know. I can't remember anything. We went out on in the field trips and things like that.
Right, right.
But, I got into I got into the Air Force too after that. They came around to the 44th Division. They wanted several men from each company to go into the Air Force because they were short men. They wanted more men in the Air Force. So I was chosen, and I was sent to Buckley Field, Colorado,
Mm-hmm.
for testing, and I passed all the tests there. And I was supposed to be either a navigator, a pilot, or pilot, navigator, or bombardier.
Bombardier, yeah.
Which they never told you until they weren't going to tell you until you got through with training.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went up to Washington State University College. They sent me up there. There for just a very short time. When we got this nice letter from, I don't know, one of the generals or something saying that they were going to close the program down because now they needed more men in the infantry.
Mm.
So there I go, with a lot of other guys, there I go back into the infantry at Camp Adair.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I hit 70th. Now in my book here I've got the copy of the letter that we received
Mhm.
saying that in essence, one thing it said was, "I'm sure that you would like to get done fighting with the enemy quicker than you would if you went through training in the Air Force," and then
Mhm.
blah blah.
Right,
And
right.
Made it sound like they were doing you a favor.
So I guess it was from there you went into the 70th?
I went into the 70s,
And do you recall the month and year for that? Was it at Camp Adair?
Was it Camp Adair? It was probably
Was it early
March
40?
of '44, probably.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable. But then when I went there, then my wife went, well, when I went to college in the Air Force, my wife went home. And then when I went back in the infantry, she came back out again.
Mm-hmm.
And she stayed with me all the way through to Fort Leonard Wood.
Oh, okay.
And so don't remember anything in particular. One thing, I had been in the Air Force, which we had quite a bit of exercise there and that, but we never had any hikes, full pack hike. As soon as I get back in the infantry, I guess they didn't have my record that I had made this 25-mile hike.
Mm-hmm.
Other way, all had to fall out and take a 25-mile hike. That kind of didn't do my legs too good. I was really sore on my legs when I got through the hike. So my wife being Catholic, and I went to church with her on Saturday, and I'm limping down the aisle in church, and one of the officers in my company saw me. He didn't say anything, but he saw me. Next day we were supposed to go out in the field on the maneuvers, march out, and he told me, he said, "I saw you Sunday." He said, "You're not going out, you're going with the kitchen in the truck." We're lucked out there.
A compassionate officer, huh?
Pleased to go to church.
Oh, okay. Is that when you were assigned to your unit there at the 70th, the company you eventually served with? Or did that come after at Fort Leonard Wood?
No, I think I was with Company L to start out with, as far as I can remember. But
So you were on the transfer then, on the train from Camp Adair to Fort Leonard Wood, correct?
Camp Adair, yes, I was on the train.
What was the conditions like on that train from camp to the fort there?
I can't remember.
Can't
Nothing
remember.
I can remember about that.
Was it a short trip? Do you recall if it was a short trip or a long trip? As trains go? Okay.
I don't even know.
Did you go undergo more training at Fort Leonard Wood?
Yes, we did.
A lot of company battalion type maneuver things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of field maneuvers there too.
And then you got the word that you're shipping out.
Right.
Yeah. What was going through your mind then?
Actually, I don't think it bothered me too much. It didn't register on my mind enough to remember it.
Right. Right.
But I guess I just took it in stride.
And went about your business and just got things done, right?
Right, that's it.
Yeah.
They tell me to go, I went.
Right. The shipment from Fort Leonard Wood to Boston. This was probably in November, I guess, late November, early December
45.
of '44 when you went to Boston before you shipped overseas.
Yeah, 45 we went to Boston.
No, it was '44.
44, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, 44.
You recall anything of that train ride from Leonard Wood to Boston?
No, I don't.
No. I know you were at Camp Miles Standish there while you're waiting to get on the ship. Did you have a chance to get out into town before you shipped out?
I'm sure I did, but I don't remember. That was in Taunton, Massachusetts, I believe, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm sure I did. No, but nothing in my memory. Nothing happened special.
Yeah. What was the name of the ship that you boarded to head over to France? Was that West Point?
The West Point, right?
And I guess you were down in the holds there. They converted the ship.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, that was kind of miserable. It was five high, the beds were 5 high. And I can't remember too much about it. I know we didn't need an escort because the ship was that fast that it was safe. And other than that, I can't remember a thing about that trip.
Were you one of the many that got seasick, or did you make it through okay?
I didn't get seasick. I don't know why, but I didn't.
So you felt pretty lucky then, I guess.
Yes,
Yeah, because
right.
I'm sure there was a lot of guys there that were pretty sick for a
They
while.
were, yeah. I remember we had the ones had to hang your helmet on the bed just in case, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't get down fast enough or whatever to get to the.
Yeah.
To the
Were you up top bunk, or were you kind of in the lower end there? So I guess you had to kind of look.
I wasn't in the top. I know that.
Yeah.
I was somewhere between. But.
Yeah. Were you on deck there when you guys were crossing the Strait of Gibraltar and kind of on your way to into France there?
Mm-hmm. We all saw the Rock of Gibraltar when we went.
Yeah.
Went,
I guess for somebody that had never been out of the country before, this was kind of an experience for you, wasn't it?
It was, yes. Well, yeah. Living in Detroit, I've been to Canada, but that wasn't like going out of the country.
Right.
That was it. That's as far as that.
Yeah. And you finally you disembarked off the ship. You're off through Marseille and you're into CP2. What were the conditions like at CP2 that you recall? That flat, cold field.
I believe, well, of course, nothing luxurious. It was tents, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I do remember, when we detrained, I remember our captain, company commander, John Major, Captain Major. I remember he was pretty rough with the guys. I mean, and, you know, swore at them and all that sort of thing. And I guess most of the guys got quite a dislike for him there. And later on, I know he made a liaison up to Phillipsburg before we went, and he got wounded. Well, we didn't see him again until after we were through fighting and we were in Saarbrücken. He came back, I don't know, probably in Saarbrücken.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, he was still disliked. And I think even the first sergeant started a petition to have him taken out of our company. Then I understand the battalion took all the officers out of our company because they did not report it. They left us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody signed the thing. And so I guess Captain Major then went back to battalion as some athletic director or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that pretty clearly.
Right.
He was disliked.
Yeah. And did you go up in the 40 and 8s, or did you go up by truck on the train?
We went with the 40 and 8, yeah.
Oh, what was that trip like? What do you recall of that trip?
Well, don't recall too much. I remember it was crowded in the car, and I don't know. It just, you know, it was rough.
Yeah, and the weather was cold. It wasn't too hospitable, was it?
Really cold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What did you try to do to try to stay warm?
Well, just try to keep the overcoat on, and I remember when we dug a foxhole, let's put the overcoat over the foxhole instead of on us to keep the cold from coming into the foxhole. I remember that, one thing. And with our shoe packs and inserts, I remember we had 2 pair. We'd put 1 pair inside our shirt to get it dry while we walked with the other pair, and vice versa.
Right.
But oddly enough, I didn't get any frostbite. I don't know why.
Yeah, there was a lot of cases of frostbite throughout the ranks, was there not?
Yes, there was a lot of it.
When did you finally arrive to the front, and you're digging your foxhole in your first line there, your first defensive position, or just what was going through your mind? I said, well, okay, as you're going up and you're finally there.
Well, like I said before, I was just following orders. They tell me to go, I went, and we went up to Phillipsburg first, and we were told to lay all of our packs and equipment on the side of a mountain. We all left it there and then took off into the woods on the mountainside. And I remember that we did sustain some casualties because the shells were coming in. We never knew whether they were ours or the German. Maybe that was Waite took over after Major. And So, of course, he probably knew where we were going, but we didn't think he did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were 2 or 3 days in the woods, and we didn't know really why we were there, but we ended up back where our packs were on the side of the mountain. I don't know how we did it. I thought we were lost,
Uh-huh.
but he got us back.
Describe for those that don't the Vosges terrain as a soldier going through all this stuff. What was that like?
Well, it was rough. It was woods and snow, and it was climbing up the steep hill mountain, and it was tough. It was hard to do, and when we had to stop and dig a foxhole, it was hard to do because the ground was frozen.
Mm-hmm.
So, all in all, it wasn't a good feeling, a good situation.
Do you recall your first day, your first time you were ever in combat?
I believe it might have been that we were marching down the road. I believe we were on both sides of the road, and I don't know, was a plane coming over or shells coming in, but we all dove for the ditches on the side. And I remember one of my friends, he said, you know, Harry, he said, I would have bet that you weren't going to make it to the end of the service, but he said, now I think you will be. I think I hit the ditch before anybody else. So yeah, I think, he said, oh yeah, I thought you'd be a basket case, he said, but no, I think you'll make it.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember who it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of my friends. So anyway, that was, I believe, the first time that we ever
Were under fire in
were
a
under
sense.
fire, yeah.
What was your impression of the German soldier as things progressed? What was your initial impression of the German soldier once you had a little experience under your belt?
I don't know if I had an opinion of them. I mean, to me, they were just, they were trying to kill us and we were trying to kill them, and I guess I just didn't have any opinion of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, we were afraid of them. I mean, just like they were afraid of us. I remember one time going through the woods. I think I was alone, or at least where I was at, I don't know. And I saw a German soldier behind a tree with a rifle pointed at me, but he was dead. If he'd have been alive, I wouldn't be here today, probably.
Mm.
He looked, you know, he was laying behind a tree
Mm-hmm.
with the rifle. I spotted him too late to, if he had been alive, it would not too bad. That kind of shook me up a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
But,
So, I guess he had been killed in previous fighting in the area then.
right,
Yeah. What specific actions that you recall that you were involved in? Were you involved in any actions in the towns? And I don't know if your company was involved at Phillipsburg at any time.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yeah. Can you describe that?
I can't remember too much about it. I remember, you know, the noise and the shells and things like that. One incident I do remember, we had a chaplain named Eugene Bell, I think it was, I'm sure, I've got pictures of him. And I'm sure we were trying to get out of Phillipsburg because the Germans were coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in my mind the chaplain Bell and another soldier and myself running out the back of a building, and there was a fence that we had to get over to get away. And he was so short, I can just remember this other guy and I picking him up and putting him over the fence so that he could get out of there.
Oh, man.
That's about the most I can remember there.
Right. And that was a pretty tough fight for the
Yeah.
275th, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. What happened at the Phillipsburg? Was your unit pulled out, and were you moved to another location for, let's say, another finger to plug the dike?
Well, yes, I mean, I know more about that now after reading the book, Into the Fire, the 275th Infantry, than I did then.
Mm-hmm.
Because there again, they said, time to move out, and you moved out. I never knew where we were going. Nobody ever knew,
Mhm.
except the officers, of course. And, I mean, I can remember sometimes we'd just get a little bit of rest. We'd in a house or whatever, and just doze off or something, and say, okay, the trucks are here, come on, and move us out to another location. But I don't remember where or how. But we went by truck, of course.
The 275th, and along with the other two regiments of the 70th, you were part of Task Force Heron, since the support troops weren't with you at the time for Operation Nordwind. You're moved back. I guess they pulled a strategic withdrawal to straighten out the lines. And when did you get word, I guess down the grapevine, that the special troops of the 70th were on the way and that you'd fight as a division for the first time?
I never had any of that information.
You just it just happened for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because they said to do it, and there wasn't any real reason why we were doing it. Nobody ever told you.
Some people looking at this down the road, from the time that you probably landed in France until the time the division fought for the first time, you probably went a long period of time without any kind of bath, did you not?
I would think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I do remember. I guess I had a lot of dysentery, and it was kind of a joke with the supply sergeant and me. Every time he saw me coming, he'd have a new pair of long johns for me. I remember that. So I guess we didn't get too much cleanup. But that's I don't remember that. I know one incident when we got to Spickram Heights, of course, and we were fighting in the woods. One of my best friends that I met over here in Camp Adair, and he was killed right next to me. His name was Buford Dews. In fact, he's mentioned in the book, Into the Fire. And a tree burst shell hit him. And then his mother and father sent me a letter wanting me to tell them all the details and everything. And I couldn't very well do that, so I took the letter to Chaplain Bell. There's a copy of their letter in there and his reply to them. So he took care of that.
Can you recall some of the towns that L275 was involved with once the division started fighting, other than in Spicheren, or you remember any of the other small towns that you had to take, or mostly you were found in terrain, open woods and stuff like that?
Well, the name Forbach and Spickren, Barenthal, I think too. I think those names all register in my mind as
right.
having been there.
Being in combat is no fun. Some people would say being in the Army is no fun at all either.
No fun at all.
And people have a natural tendency to humorize, make light of very stressful situations in order to cope. Was there one incident that really struck you as funny despite all the destruction going on around you?
No, I can't think of anything like that. I do remember, well, it wasn't funny, no. We were in a pillbox. I belonged to company headquarters, and we did all the communication, the wire laying between the platoons and company headquarters. And we were in the pillbox, and one of the platoon leaders, I don't know who it was in there with us. And the shells started coming in. The 88s were coming in pretty good then. And the officers that were there, they told this guy, well, hey, stay here until things die down. And he didn't want to do that because he wanted to go see how his platoon was making out. And I understand that when he went back there, an 88 shell followed him right into his foxhole, and he was killed. And if he had listened to them, he probably would have been, either here today or days later.
Right.
I don't think of anything funny.
The 70th went on eventually to push through Saarbrücken and cross the Saar. Is there any event that you recall during that time when you guys finally crossed into Saarbrücken?
I'm not sure if it was in Saarbrücken or not, but I can remember one house that I went into, and I went down into the basement, And I had my rifle with me, of course, down in the basement, and there were some civilians down there, but that's the only thing I can remember about that. I'm sure that during the action there, I had gone into one house.
I guess the role changed a little bit once the 70th crossed the SAR and took Saarbrücken, since they were kind of pinched out by Patton's army in the 7th where they joined. What was the duty like after that when you finally went into reserves? Was it more mopping up, occupation type thing for you?
Yeah, we didn't, actually we didn't have too much to do. I mean, like I say, I was in the company headquarters laying out the wire to all the different platoons. We'd be in a different town, maybe a couple miles or so away from each other. And yeah, I remember one time we laid the wire out. There was two of us, the Jeep driver and the staff sergeant, and we laid the wire out to this town. They had the Jeep, and when we were through, we got into the Jeep to come back to headquarters, and this sergeant, he wasn't too bright because he told the Jeep driver, he says, "I tell you what, there was a shallow ditch there." He says, "You stop the Jeep." He says, "I'll pull the pin on this grenade." This actually happened too. And he says, "Now throw it in the ditch and you take off." And he said, "We'll see if we can get away in time." Well, he threw the grenade in the ditch. The Jeep driver stalled the Jeep. It didn't take off. So the sergeant was sitting next to that driver. He took off down the road, and the Jeep driver took off down the road. I was on the curbside. I would have gotten it. The guy next to me, I don't know who he was. I leaped over him and hit the pavement, and he came up. I was the first one to hit the pavement. And luckily, nobody got hurt in that. But I just, to this day, I can't imagine that sergeant's thinking on throwing that grenade in the ditch just for fun, just for kicks. That was a pretty stupid thing.
Do you recall where you were at when you finally got word that the Germans had surrendered?
It was either Frankfurt or Kelkheim. I'm not sure. I remember we took over a monastery in Kelkheim. I've got pictures of that here in the book too. We were playing volleyball out on the court and behind and everything. I believe that's where we were at the time. Well, actually, you mean when Japan surrendered?
No, when the Germans surrendered.
When the Germans, yeah, okay,
yeah.
We were there.
Okay. Were there rumors circulating, or did you get any kind of concrete word that, okay, the Germans have surrendered, but there's still Japan and you guys might be going to the Pacific?
Yes, we did. We heard about that. I don't know whether it was on the train coming back to Le Havre or not. I mean, but we did hear. I think it was on the train that we heard about that. We were going to go back to the States and then be shipped out to Japan after probably a furlough or something.